Hi, welcome. Thanks for taking time to join us for another installment of Slow Art presented by the Modern Art Museum of Fort Worth. In this installment, we will look at wall drawing number 50A, a conceptual work by Sol LeWitt, completed in 1970. Unlike typical artworks in the museum, LeWitt's wall drawing number 50A is actually part of the museum, a concept that became very important to the artist. It is somewhat subtle in installation and location, and patrons report walking by numerous times without realizing it exists. We will explore this beautiful work in detail, but first, knowing more about a modern artist is always helpful in understanding the art they have created. Regarding Sol LeWitt, as with all of the minimalists and conceptualists, we will see that his art was focused around his thoughts, his education, his brain. Understanding a bit about his art philosophy and experience helps to better appreciate his work. LeWitt continually completed three-dimensional work, but is probably best known for the wall drawings. Sol LeWitt was born in Hartford, Connecticut in 1928. His father, Abraham LeWitt, was a doctor, and his mother, Sophia, known as Sophie, was a nurse. His father had a successful practice, but lost much of his money speculating on real estate. He passed away when Sol was only 6, leaving Sol and his mother in financial distress. They moved to New Britain, Connecticut, with his mother's sister, eventually moving to their own apartment, shown here. According to one of his teachers, Sol was a good student, but too serious. He was very mature for his age. At Syracuse University, LeWitt was a marginal student, with the exception of English literature, where he scored A's. LeWitt stated in an interview that the longtime dean of the College of Fine Arts at Syracuse, Lemuel C. Dillenbeck, thought that the student from New Britain might become a great success if only he would choose a field other than art. Part of the problem was attributed to a focus on old world art at Syracuse. Modernism was not an accepted topic. On the other hand, LeWitt was not committed to repeating the past. Like many artists at the time, he was searching for his place and for something new. After graduating from Syracuse, Sol LeWitt was drafted into the Army in 1951 and served in the Quartermaster Corps in Korea until 1953. After his Army service, he returned to New York City and attended a cartoonists and illustrators school. He first worked for 17 magazine, doing basically what amounted to copy work, and then took a new job as a graphic artist for the architect I.M. Pei. LeWitt is shown here in his New York studio, and then later working in his new Italian home of Spoleto, Italy, where he purchased a house in 1972. It was in New York, however, that LeWitt experienced his evolution as a minimalist and conceptualist from a number of influences in the heart of the modern art movement. During his early years in New York, a number of relationships helped shape his artistic future. He lived in the epicenter of and during the abstract expressionist movement in New York. LeWitt described being in awe of de Kooning, Pollock, Rothko, and Motherwell. But he also described not being sure of exactly what they were doing and felt his attempts at Ab X were complete failures. LeWitt stated that he liked Lichtenstein, Oldenburg, and Warhol as well. Theoretically, he didn't care for what they were doing, but did realize that they were serious artists doing something really interesting. During this time, he moved into a new apartment and found a book in the sofa that had been left behind by a previous tenant. The book was a first edition of photographs from the 1880s by British photographer Edward Muybridge. Muybridge is often credited with the idea of motion photography and the pictures of horses running intrigued LeWitt. In a 1974 interview, LeWitt stated, "I think that my bridge was really the biggest influence on my art of any older artist. He had a way of creating art that did not rely on the whim of the moment, but on a consistently thought out process that gave results that were interesting and exciting." LeWitt was well acquainted with contemporaries Dan Flavin and Donald Judd, both also part of the minimalist and conceptualist art movement, and both disciples of the idea of progressions. LeWitt would credit Flavin's nominal 3 as being important in the development of his own concepts. These relationships and experiences helped LeWitt begin to answer the question he had formed in college around his place in art and what he could accomplish that was new. From the book Sol LeWitt, A Life of Ideas by Larry Bloom, the author states, "What struck LeWitt, as well as other members of the circle that developed around him, was that somehow art was at a dead end. They felt that the role of the artist was to invent, not copy. But invent what?" As LeWitt explained to Gary Garrels in 2000, what happened next, the development of what we call minimalism, was not some new advance on what had come before, but, in a sense, a going backward, stripping art down to its bare essentials. In effect, it was a process of looking at art and the idea of art as if it had never been invented. Specific influences for the wall drawings were Agnes Martin and Janis Kournelis. Regarding Agnes Martin, having been accused of copying Agnes Martin, LeWitt stated in a 1978 MoMA article that he considered Martin an influence. He stated, "Thank you for the grid." Janis Kournelis produced an exhibit at the Attico Gallery in Italy featuring a dozen live horses. LeWitt saw it and began contemplating the concept of using the gallery as part of the art. This concept was more common in Italy. According to LeWitt, before easel painting, there were the frescoes. Easel painting came in the late 15th century, from Belgium, when they started to use canvas. And at the same time, murals had begun to reappear with Diego Rivera and other Mexican artists. Prior to the exploration and conceptual development of the wall drawings, LeWitt created what he referred to as structures. The first, shown here, was a skeleton structure of stacked cubes. These structures were the beginning of what was to be LeWitt's serial art. The grid structures were followed by more complex geometric structures of aluminum and baked enamel, and with a number of cement block structures, one at his alma mater, Syracuse University, shown here. As the wall drawings developed, not all were simply graphite and colored pencil lines. Shown here is a wall drawing using bright colors and rectangular boxes forming curved lines, executed in ceramic tile on the wall of the Columbus Circle subway station in Manhattan. It should be noted here that LeWitt was a colorist. In fact, he once proclaimed, "I am one of the great colorists of the century, and I think this is the color." He was, in this instance, painting the hallway of his new Connecticut house brown. He painted the kitchen bright yellow and the door to the kitchen red. Now to the Modern's wall drawing number 50A. Take a minute and let your eyes adjust to the drawing. Francis Colpett, professor of art history at Texas Christian University, states in the museum's catalog that wall drawing number 50A is one of the most beautiful, an assessment, however, that the artist considered completely irrelevant. As a conceptual artist, he gave precedence to the idea of a work of art over its sensuous appearance and to systematic logic over taste. In 1967, he explained that conceptual art is good only when the idea is good. Colpett goes on to say, when viewed from a suitable distance, subtle fields of complex colors, including aqua, blue-violet, peach, and coral, emerge by optical mixture, in which colors are mixed in the viewer's eye rather than on the artist's palette. The conceptual rigor of LeWitt's system delivers a surprisingly delicate gossamer web of color. If we pay close attention to the wall plate describing the work, we see the conceptual instruction envisioned by LeWitt: a wall divided into 4 parts by lines drawn from the corner to corner, each section with 3 different colors made of parallel lines superimposed. Color pencil, dimensions variable. Next, to better understand what this means, we will look at a close-up of the work. Looking at a close-up view, the instructions take on more meaning. First, the view is divided into 4 parts by lines drawn from corner to corner. Each part has 3 colors. 4 colors in total are used. The lines are made using graphite and, as directed, color pencil. Graphite is used for vertical lines, yellow color pencil for horizontal lines, red color pencil for right diagonal lines, and blue color pencil for left diagonal lines. These 4 colors allow for 4 quadrants, 3 colors each, no quadrant alike. LeWitt only started using color pencil in 1969, so this work is one of his earlier works in color. As far as the lines being superimposed, the lines cross over one another so that all are still evident, as required both by LeWitt's instructions and the definition of superimposed in the Oxford English Dictionary. Since we're looking at a small section detail view of the work, the variable dimension requirement seems self-evident, as any size square or rectangle wall surface would work for installation. In this view, we can see the complex colors produced by optical mixture, as we discussed a couple slides back. Looking at the work again, try to imagine what the resulting optical mixture might be if other colors were used for the lines. Colors other than blue, red, black, and yellow. When touring this work, common questions are frequently asked, which I will tackle here. They are: what if the wall is painted over? Does the art still exist? Can it be moved? Who actually drew the lines? And finally, how were the drawings installed? The installation on the museum wall would seem to make the work permanent, yet in fact, it isn't as simple as that. The museum owns the concept, LeWitt's idea. Like many other conceptual artists at the time, LeWitt issued a certificate providing evidence that the numbered wall drawing is authentic. The certificate, a sample shown here, is the actual value component of the art. Note in this sample, the first installation is referenced. Legal challenges have supported the idea that the certificate holder can move the installation, and as long as the certificate remains in their possession, the new image is in fact the authentic image. A home with a LeWitt wall drawing was sold and the art covered over. The Dia Foundation retained the certificate of authenticity. When the original drawing started bleeding through the wall covering, the homeowner sought to restore the drawing as an original LeWitt, but alas, without the certificate, the wall is just bleeding. In another case, a gallerist lost the certificates, and the courts upheld the concept that the certificates are the items of actual value. All of that said, even without the certificate, the installations can still be enjoyed as beautiful works of art, even if not authenticated. The who and how of installation varied over the years and by the individual installation. Early on, LeWitt installed his own work. As time went by, he began to use studio assistants and other contracted help for installations. In this case, the final installation of wall drawing 50A was completed by a combination of a draftsman from the LeWitt Foundation and artisans from the museum. This work took approximately 5 weeks to complete. You can view a video of the installation on the Modern's website if you would like to know more about the installation. The block walls shown earlier in this presentation required brick and block masons to install. LeWitt worked out deals with bricklayers' unions to allow apprentices to construct the walls, thus reducing the cost and providing training to the apprentices. This is important as LeWitt was known to be very supportive of new artists and, apparently, brick masons. It was very common for him to buy art from young artists to help support them during their development. As a minimalist and conceptualist, Sol LeWitt personified the core beliefs linking the various members of the so-called movement. He believed that the idea behind the art superseded the actual execution of the art, and that the artist's mind was far more important in art than the artist's hands and skill. LeWitt left over 1,200 wall drawings and countless structures behind to be enjoyed by generations to come. But perhaps more than that, he supported, encouraged, and nurtured dozens of artists throughout his career, the result of which is an untold wealth of creativity and art. He always championed female artists, even when not necessarily in vogue to do so. And he always spoke his mind. He was unique in his work and in his contribution to modern art. You're encouraged to view this beautiful work in person at the museum, if at all possible. These images are just a hint of the beauty of this extraordinary mural. Thank you for spending time with us today, and we look forward to sharing with you the next installment of Slow Art presented by the Modern Art Museum of Fort Worth.